Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from the CUNY TV Foundation, Capital One Bank, Genova Burns, Gian Tomasi and Webster, New York Community Bank, the Witkoff Group, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International NYC, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Eastern Union Funding, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors LLC, Herrick Feinstein LLP, Hersha Hospitality Trust, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides Centurion Holdings, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Matone Group, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, New Banks, People's United Bank, RBS Citizens Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling & Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, LLC, and these friends.
The New York City office market is really doing great. There are parts of the country very close by in New Jersey and other areas which aren't doing that well. But so today I've brought together these four interesting individual owners who own property in New York, New Jersey, Westchester, and other parts to provide their insight on the office market in the area. My guests today include Eric Hadar, who is the chairman and co-founder of Allied Partners, Rob Lapidus. I see his Yankee ring over here, so we'll have that over here. Rob is the partner, CIO at L&L Holdings. Adam Altman, who's the managing member and co-founder of KABR Group. And last but definitely not least, Scott Galin, who is a partner, president, CEO of Handler Real Estate Organization. So you own, we would say, mostly A- buildings and A buildings, and you're redeveloping in Manhattan. You own a variety of, let's say, B buildings over here. You have basically buildings which were once C buildings, which have become more of a B plus building over here. And you are a martyr, okay? You've gone to the state of New Jersey, but you bought buildings in New Jersey and Long Island, but you've done this in a different way. You bought them for buildings that you couldn't build them for the price that you paid. So how do you look at the office market? The statistics just recently came out. The fourth quarter of 2013 was the best leasing market since 2008. The numbers are there. How do you see the office market in general? Is it a tale of two cities? Is it a tale of different markets?
It's definitely a tale of two cities. It's the commodity space, which sort of ebbs and flows with, external forces. And then there's sort of specialty spaces, redeveloped spaces, reimagined spaces that meet the needs of the tenants for the 21st century. So, if you look at, 20 years ago, the way office space was built out and the users of office space, it was closed off offices, secretaries every 20 feet, you couldn't see each other. Now it's all about a tenant experience. It's all about collaboration. It's all about creating environments for intersections of ideas. So it's not just in the technology companies sort of where it starts, but look at Gray Advertising's build out, at 205th Avenue. open, young people, there's all this breakout space and collaborative space. There's a room that they have a bed in where they sit on the bed and talk about ideas. So that is really the future. And if you have a building that can accommodate those types of needs, you're going to be successful in this marketplace. So it's some of the cooler submarkets, you know, in Chelsea and Flatiron and, you know, the downtown meatpacking type of places. But it's really about the buildings themselves. So there are some B buildings that have cool brick exterior and stuff like that.
Avenue, 205th Avenue is a B building. It was a C building.
It was a C building.
Okay, it was a C building. It hadn't been done anything. It was basically small toy merchants over there. The distributors.
International Toy Center.
Okay, it was a toy center. It was, you know, it was poorly maintained. Okay, and it was a total redo on that property, and also what you did at 195 Broadway and in most of your properties. But you're now also doing something a little different because you're taking over a property on Madison Avenue, and then you're going to take down another building. So let's talk about how do you see those type of office spaces?
Well, if you think about, you know, the Hudson Yards and the World Trade Center, and those are new modern buildings. New York City is a very old office market. We're older than London, we're older than Paris, right? So a lot of the tenants who are going to, you know, the World Trade Center and Hudson Yards, there are no really other alternatives for, you know, modern buildings. So what we're doing in the case of 390 Madison is basically reimagining that building, taking out about, you know, 30% of the existing steel and structure, putting on the top, creating specialty spaces, double, triple height, outdoor spaces, more exciting space where the 21st century tenant can be. At 425 Park, it's going to be the first new office building, you know, block front office building in Manhattan in 50 years. And there might not be another one for 50 years. I mean, you know, how do you get an empty building on Park Avenue? It's just an aberration that a ground lease terminates. So there, you know, we hired Norman Foster and an incredible team, you know, the entire team there, to really come up with, you know, the best possible product we can in, you know, the best possible market. So some of the tenants who went to the Hudson Yards, maybe that location today isn't a great location because infrastructure and transportation, and have to live through a construction site, but tenants need new product. We think by giving them new product in traditional, you know, Midtown Plaza district, it's going to be the best of all worlds. And, you know, this whole discussion about Midtown's rezoning that, you know, Bloomberg tried to push through, we thought made a lot of sense for New York because Midtown is old and you need to give it some sort of stimulus to incentivize people to sort of redevelop and reimagine these buildings.
Relating to that, you own about 6 or 7 buildings, I mean, besides the other properties. Your buildings are probably in the age ranging from 40 to 80 years of age, okay? Now, how do you see, you know, you have Lexington Avenue, you have the 40th Street Bryant Park, which was a total redevelopment of the area, which is doing great now, which is right near you in the fashion district, as we would say.
Garment
here,
district.
Garment fashion. How do you see that, and how do you see Times Square? Because 10 years ago, if I would do a show in Times Square, somebody said, I wouldn't want to be in an office building in Times Square. You know, it's a different world.
It's a different, I mean, the most stunning thing to me in my career has been to witness the transformation of neighborhoods that no one ever considered for commercial use, and the desirability for a lot of these young companies to go and really prioritize being in a cutting edge location. We call cutting edge, in those days it would have been a C location, that would say prefer that to a traditional Midtown location. I mean, we see it with Park Avenue South and those rents there. We see it in Chelsea. We see it in the meatpacking district. I mean, neighborhoods that are difficult to get to, poor transportation. It's all about this sort of extension of a lifestyle where young companies want to create an environment where it's going to be fun.
I mean, nobody, you know, you talk about Midtown South, nobody, I remember many years ago, no one wanted to be on 14th Street. I mean, 7th, 8th Avenue and 14th
That's
Street.
right.
9th Avenue.
That's right.
I mean,
Right.
you know, if
No one wanted to be there legally.
Legally, okay,
Right.
you know.
It's almost more desirable now than a traditional location. I mean, so long as, and I agree with what Rob said, as long as you create a cool space.
Scott, what you've done on your buildings, because, you know, you had traditional garment center buildings. okay? You had some avenue buildings and you had off-avenue buildings, and these were garment center buildings where, you know, Sophie, the bookkeeper was there, and they would, but you've redeveloped. And you know what? We were talking before. You have tenants that they have 3-year leases. I mean, which banks a couple years ago said, hey, I'm not taking that short time. So how do you see that, and why do you change the way that the handler properties were?
I think we changed because the world changed. New York, the metamorphosis is, it's fascinating. For 35 years, I've been here since I started in school, in college, through now. And I walk around every day, and I really do, I'm bewildered every day walking through some of these neighborhoods, whether it's Alphabet City, which we were told when we were at NYU, don't walk anywhere near there, and now it's unbelievable, to Times Square, et cetera. But in our buildings, the tenancy changed. The tenancy has, you know, went to this whole sort of TAMI notion, alternative tenants, tech and advertising, media, and information. And so we had to change our buildings to accommodate for the new tenancy. This is not a one-horse town anymore. It's not driven solely by the financial sector, albeit they still may be the biggest sector. The alternative uses, those new uses, the leasing activity is dramatically up. So we had these older buildings had sort of the core spaces that they liked, and we figured out, gee, they want these high ceilings, they want open spaces, as Rob said, they don't want it to look like Mad Men from the 60s, there's no secretarial pools. So we said, gee, we have this space. And we started retrofitting it and spec building some of it, and found that even some of the smaller professional firms, we have some small law firms, they didn't want it to look like a law firm. Yep. They wanted open spaces with a couple of offices. And then I went to a meeting with one of my brokers in one of our buildings, a 10,000-foot full-floor space, and we sat down with their architect, and they had 140 people, and they said, okay, we don't want any offices. I said, well, what do you mean? You're the CEO, and no, we don't want any offices. We just want activity spaces and hangout spaces. It's a whole hotel concept, and I felt a little old, and I said, well, what about the copy room? He goes, we don't have any paper. I said, what do you mean? He goes, we don't have copy paper. Everyone has a tablet and a desktop.
Wait, and since, you know, it relates to our younger generation, who being our youngest member of the panel over here, you have a suburban office, okay? Rob would like to forget that they own one suburban office, but, you know...
What suburban office?
Suburban office. Who are the tenancies? And as I was alluding and bringing up before, you purchased these buildings at the right price, okay? We couldn't do the TI tenant improvement for the price that you paid for the buildings over there. So who's moving to those tenants? Why are they going to the suburban? Are they getting the urban tax credits, which is one of the benefits of New Jersey, which we don't have in New York? I mean, we don't have any of these incentives. They didn't renew them in July that we had.
Well, we own office buildings in New Jersey, Long Island, Westchester, Connecticut, and it is another world from the Manhattan world that these gentlemen are explaining. We're driven by price, right? It's a price market. Everyone's going to be incredibly rent price sensitive.
So somebody can move into your building for $15 a foot, would you say?
Not that low.
20,
but, yeah,
but you are at
yes,
$20
yeah, you can do teen deals in the suburbs. Now, we have buildings that are also buildings that are $24, $25, $26, but once you get up to that $26, $28, $30 level, you're at the top.
You're at the best.
Our taxes and operating
I was going to say,
in some of our buildings.
We'll do the cleaning for that. I mean,
right. I mean, you know, and cleaning, all those things, we look at each one of those line items. But you're right, our basis and the way we bought all of these buildings was, frankly, because guys like Rob said, I've been there, done this. This is a pain in my neck, and we'll take it off your hands.
When I was looking at your portfolio, and you have the Roseland building over there, I remember, and this is probably when Carol started in public accounting or something, you know, they were all these accounting firms. Everybody had relocated from Newark to Roseland.
Yeah.
Roseland was
Becker Farm Road, baby.
Okay, Becker
Don't need
Farm.
development.
Okay, it was everything over there, and then people said, what am I doing in Roseland? It was like Westchester. I mean, the Westchester example was the worst situation, because all these companies, these major companies, Philip Morris and everybody went out to Westchester, Texaco, and they said, now you have vacant buildings. That's why they're changing up in Westchester.
So we just bought in Roseland. Literally, we just bought something in Roseland.
Which building?
We bought 3 and 5 ADP.
Okay.
Okay, we bought them both empty. This is approximately 12 months ago. We're 100% leased.
So who?
We're 100% leased.
So who leased
So
them?
ADP was going to move out. They were building more efficient space. We bought the buildings from ADP. As it turns out, they still needed some space in the
office
buildings because they couldn't move into, everyone was going to work from home, this efficient working. Well, efficient working might work in New York City where you have these really efficient spaces and this creative class who is able to go on their tablet and then, take their Vespa back to Soho and then, back to, when you're in the suburbs and you live 15, 20, 30 miles away, people still need to show up at the office and actually put in regular work days. So ADP needed the space. Law firms, accounting firms, dish networks. They needed call center space. But I don't want to say just call centers, higher end, really technology help and service space. And we bought the building at a basis where effectively we could give them a parking ratio of close to 5 per 1,000, even though the building was built lower, and essentially kill part of the space. Right?
Yeah, but here's the situation. Last year, okay, I believe the only person who really purchased the building last year, an office building, would be you in this group sitting over here. You've recapitalized yours.
No, we purchased.
Where'd you buy?
We purchased 114 Fifth last year,
So,
and we purchased 222 was a little over a year ago.
okay, so it was 114 and you bought the Brill building. How hard is it because of I was looking at the reports and the statistics. Office buildings are trading at higher prices in Manhattan than we've seen in years. I mean, and
Ever.
okay,
Some of the trades
Times
have the
Square
highest
properties over there, if you take Times Square, if you take, 767 Fifth Avenue, these buildings have traded over there. How do you make a decision to buy at this height? And I think you gave a great comment about how an office owner buys, sometimes holding their breath. What do you mean by that?
Well, listen, New York City is all about the future. So when you're actually closing on a deal in Manhattan, you always feel like you're paying a lot, right? You're paying a lot. You're holding your nose, I think is what I said. But you're paying a lot with a vision to create value to justify that. You have, again, this is the ultimate supply-constrained market. We're an island. And the ability to build here is getting more and more difficult with the building department, et cetera. And it's truly a global gateway city where capital from all over the globe is interested. I mean, there isn't a week that goes by in our office where we are not talking to someone from Asia, Canada, Latin America, Europe, who wants to invest here. So although it's expensive, when I talk to some of my investors who are from Hong Kong and Singapore, they're like, we talk about the condo prices in Manhattan, and they think it's cheap.
Yeah.
They say, well, Hong Kong, everything's $10,000 a foot. Your high end's only $6,000 to $8,000, or whatever they say. So the consumer, the capital that's looking at Manhattan, is looking at London, is looking at Hong Kong, isn't looking at New Jersey, certainly, isn't looking at Chicago or Boston. It's this global concept. And so, you have to really sort of understand that now listen, tenants have to pay rent. And the cost of doing business in New York City, is a lot. And so, there's always that balancing act of how deep that market is and all that kind of jazz. But I forgot it was Adam Scott who said, the market today isn't just financial services. I mean, they talked about the Google effect when they bought 111 8th and all the technology that's burned there. Listen, 195 Broadway, 222, I call it the old economy versus new economy. My old tenants were J.P. Morgan and Thompson Financial and a big law firm. The new ones are coming in are the XO Group, Omnicom, Condé Nast, HarperCollins, WeWork. Those are all tenants that we've signed, in the last year or two that are coming to those buildings that were, in a previous cycle,
who's
unheard
coming
of.
to your building, like on 40th Street?
Well, they're tenants that no longer feel that it's appropriate for their business to be in traditional locations. I mean, you talk about a Condé Nast I mean, look what's going on downtown. You know, to me, we've got 40th Street, we've got WeWork in one of our buildings, we've got a school in another, we've got a long-term development plan there. But I think, you know, in terms of, you asked the question about buying property, I think that you have to have a plan. You've got to have a vision. You're not going to buy something that's ever going to show on the numbers on the current market that it's going to make a lot of sense. You have to have some angle.
But you also have to be realistic that, you know, people can only pay rent up to a certain point. There are different tenants who can pay. You know, certain companies can pay $100 a foot, but the nonprofits have to be in a certain type of building. They have to be in a lower expense because they're living on a lower
That's right.
situation.
Right,
over there.
and that's
the smaller accounting firms who were at 561 7th Avenue need to be.
That's the
in that type of
difference,
building.
and there's a market for that. That's a commodity building. That's a building that's not going through a transformation and a big redevelopment. There's a lot of products still available for those sorts of industries and those sorts of tenants.
Although this B product now, there's a study out that says that the B product is actually reducing each year because a lot of it is being converted to res and hotel. So B office space.
It was being converted. I'd say there's less being converted in Midtown to hotel. Okay, Lower Manhattan is a different matter because, you know, my friends at AKA are building extended stay over there and conversion. But today we don't have in the Midtown area the conversion as much to residential.
Well, rents are too high.
Right, they don't make any sense. But if you look at this B number, the inventory right now, there's about a 7% vacancy in B buildings. And they're projecting in 2018 about a 4% and 2025 a negative absorption rate with the people that'll want B product.
But
and then
part
because
of
you can't build B.
What about, you know, I just noticed something today. Brooklyn office space wasn't doing well. And now Brooklyn office space is doing well because there are companies are moving to Brooklyn, you know, but people are moving to Brooklyn.
Yep.
I'm not saying people are moving to Brooklyn. Would you see yourself, I mean, you've never gone to the boroughs to speak of for office.
You know, Brooklyn is interesting. I mean, there could be a site or an opportunity or something in Brooklyn that we would look at because from a macro perspective where we see tenant demand, you know, the types of tenants that we have in a lot of our portfolio, you know, Brooklyn would work for them. So
what about Queens?
That creative class is certainly looking at Brooklyn because they're living there and you're talking about the live-work situation. But to be fair to some suburban products, for instance, we have close to 1 million square feet in Ridgefield Park. You need to bring a vision. You know, I don't want to just be the low-cost provider, right? It's not just like come into the 99-cent store. We aim to.
Well, this was Dollar Tree.
Dollar Tree, 99 cents. But we aim to give our tenants a superior experience, to take buildings that might have been B and make them A buildings. Because just because you live in the suburbs, if you're an executive in the suburbs, you still want to have lifestyle. You still want some of that open space. You still want to be able to go for a run in the park. And certain of our markets can offer that. So Ridgefield Park, you can take a run in Overpeck Park. You know, we're putting in brand new gyms with high-end locker rooms. And so if you're a proprietor of a small company and you need 5,000 or 10,000 square feet and you could feel like $1 million but pay $25, that's a value proposition. It really is. Now we have tenants like Samsung, right, who their entire, a lot of their workforce is very deeply entrenched around Ridgefield Park. So New Jersey makes a lot of sense for them. We have to be very conscious of providing them with a tremendous level of quality and a vision for the park. But Google's not coming to Ridgefield Park yet. I mean, maybe I should make a phone call, but not yet. You know, but
listen, and Samsung as a company might want to occupy space there, but Samsung as an investor is probably only buying in Manhattan.
Right.
So there's a dichotomy there.
Absolutely, that's correct.
You know, it's interesting because I think there's certain tenants. You know, I had an experience with Scholastic,
Yeah, I remember
568 Broadway.
I remember that.
Sure. Right.
You still own that building?
Yeah.
Wanna sell it?
It's a great building.
We could talk.
Can I broker this?
Get back to Scholastic as opposed to selling it.
Scholastic will tell you the story about their foray into the suburbs. There was a time in the 80s when rents were getting crazy that they felt they could relocate the company. So they did. They went out to Jersey somewhere.
Yep.
And Dick Robinson tells the story that it was the worst error in his entire career, because what he realized is that Scholastic's an example of a company that thrives on creativity and the ability for their workforce to be downtown in Soho, where their employees lived and socialized and studied, and they had people with cards coming in at 2 in the morning to write software at, you know, who knows what mental state they're in.
mean, you know,
so you can't replace.
You know, and if you look at that, what happened with Soho, you know, the late Tony Goldman, you know, what he really started over there. And, you know, let's take 205th Avenue, the toy building. I mean, and with Italy over there, you know, today Madison Square Park is a neighborhood that everyone wants. It's Midtown South. I mean, the Flatiron building, the Grouse had nobody tenants. There was nothing over there. You know, it's a different world.
It's the whole experience. It's the whole, listen, UBS was one of the great examples, right? Left the city, got to Stanford, and their entire workforce revolted. So listen, the beauty about our business is there are many ways to make money.
Sure.
You might have a buy, fix, and sell mentality for when you buy something really cheap, you lease it up and sell it. You know, something like, for us, like 205th Avenue or 195 Broadway or 425 Park, we want to own that forever.
Sure.
Right? That is real estate. That is irreplaceable. You build a core. You want to own it forever. It's a different investment thesis. So you can make money anywhere.
So here's a question. Do you see, you know, because there was a discussion, you know, when Vornado bought the property at 125th Street and Park Avenue, you know, the office space moving there. North of 96th Street, office space has not done well. Do you see any possibility that, you know, with the city growing like in Hudson Yards, that it will grow into that market also?
Listen, over a long enough period of time, you know, Manhattan real estate values go in one direction. It's a very cyclical world, but if you take a 350...
As Norman Cerner said, you know, it has to go up, you know. But
well, over a 350-year period, I think that it's proven out. You know, so I remember...
I'm talking short term, okay? I don't want to talk about long term.
Okay,
You know?
short term, I don't see I think there are other areas that have more promise
Okay, do you
for
think
the office market.
Do you think there's a promise because, you know, in Queens? I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Long Island City.
Long Island
Look,
City,
I
you
think,
know,
let's not forget, if you look back over the last 12 years, I don't think there's ever been a period in New York's history that has gone through such a transformation in terms of the number of neighborhoods that have been sterilized and cleaned up and legitimized than we had over the Bloomberg term. I mean, it's miraculous.
And the Cornell Technion thing is transformation.
Right, and that goes right to the entire East Side and how that's going to how educational impact and talking about
Life science,
creative class,
medical
life
science,
science, how that's going to
engineers.
impact. That can impact
The Upper
north
East
of
Side.
96th
The Upper
Street. I
East Side-
completely agree with you.
The Upper
That
East
could be the
Side,
catalyst.
you may see people taking space up there as a result of this
That's
because
right.
there's nowhere else to go
right.
if
No
you're over
question.
on that
Let's
island.
talk about what Columbia is doing with their expansion. I mean, there's
listen.
no question that Harlem is going to
That becomes a bookend between the Cornell and Columbia. All of a sudden, you have that kind of bookend that squeezes.
It might not be office use per se, but there
it may be a
use
use.
there.
Yeah.
28 minutes is a short time, and especially when you have 4 very interesting individuals. So we'll promise to have you back later on in the season. And I'd like to thank Eric Hadar, Rob Lapidus, Adam Altman, and Scott Galin, and I'll see you next week.